Hi there, my name is Liam Edwards. You may know me as a video game podcaster. I am the host and creator of a podcast called Final Games, which is a bi-weekly podcast all about sending video game industry members to a deserted island in which they can only take 8 games to play with them for the rest of their days. What 8 they take and why is the reason behind the show. We have a lot of fun. And then you might also know me from the weekly video game podcast, which I do with my 2 friends, Matt Visual and George Super Bunny Hop Weedman from YouTube. It's the Dad and Sons podcast, which you can see right behind me. It's a weekly video game podcast where we talk about all manner of things. But also, some of you may know me as kind of a video game creator or video game designer. Some of you may know I used to work in AAA. I worked at Rockstar Games for 3 to 4 years. I forget really how long. Where I worked on GTA 5, predominantly mostly on the multiplayer, a little bit on the single player, and then I did some like mobile ports of San Andreas and Vice City and stuff like that. And also some of you might know me as the creator of a small little indie game that I made and released earlier this year called Salaryman Suzuki-san, which is an endless runner inspired by my time here in Japan. Yes, I live in Japan. About a salaryman called Suzuki-san who has to get to work. It was a game inspired by watching salarymen on the train here in Japan and just being very interested in how hard they work, starting super early, getting home really late, and the idea that work is so predominant in their life here in Japan. So yeah, and I released that for free on itch.io. It was my first ever solo project, and it was like a big learning experience for me with Game Maker, something I was getting to grips with at the time. And yeah, so I started using Game Maker to make this game called Salaryman Suzuki-san, which I released for free. It's sort of half finished. I kind of just needed to get it out the door. Yeah, I released it on itch.io. You can go to itch.io/Salaryman Suzuki-san if you want to try it out. You're probably seeing footage of it right now overlaid. Yeah, so if that interests you, please go check it out. I think it ranked in the top 10 for free games on itch.io for like 2 or 3 weeks, and you'll find it on there. It had quite a large amount of downloads, which was very, very nice for my first ever project. But since then, I have been working on a new project that a lot of people have asked me about because I speak on Dad and Sons about designing games and stuff all the time. And I've kind of spent a lot of time prototyping and learning stuff with Game Maker to approach a new project, and one sort of just came out of the stuff I was learning with Game Maker. Game Maker is an engine I picked up. I know a lot of people have some problems with Game Maker, and a lot of people are like, use Unity or Unreal, and I get that. They are totally fantastic engines. But Game Maker was basically the most accessible for me at the time where I was. As you can see, I sort of work on a laptop here, and I can't use anything very powerful. And so Game Maker was just something I jumped straight into after a friend recommended it to me. I watched a lot of Tom Francis's Game Maker tutorials, the guy who made Gunpoint. Also Derek Yu, who's been a guest on my podcast Final Games. His tutorials from back on TIG Source, all that date back almost 10 years now. Still incredibly helpful, and even like most of the information on there still stands today. Very, very useful. And Sean Spalding as well, who does great YouTube tutorials on Game Maker. So I was binge watching a lot of that, and I was basically just getting into game design again. Designing games and making games is all I've ever wanted to do in my life. So I was just happy to be making games again. And Salaryman Suzuki-san came out of that. It was kind of a hodgepodge of code and all these things that I had to re-remember. I did study computer science when I was in university, but I'd forgotten how to basically program and everything, so I was getting used to GML and scripting and programming languages again. And yeah, Salaryman Suzuki-san could have been better had I had the knowledge I had now. After I finished that project, I spent a lot of time, like a couple of months, learning a lot more complex stuff like state machines and scripting and other stuff to do with Game Maker that basically could break off the limitations. So if I had a game idea, I could execute on it, which is something that I've always struggled with because I'm a designer at heart. I've always designed games and I love making stuff. But because of the limitations of my art or my programming, it's always been difficult to execute those ideas fully. So with this new project, I wanted to or whatever the new project was going to be, I wanted to approach it with the idea that I didn't really have any limitations. Art is still a huge problem for me, as you'll see with some of the pixel art and the early pixel art I had for this new project. But yeah, in terms of like learning about state machines, that opened entire new doors for me with Game Maker. So the new project that I'm working on is a new game that I announced like it's a AAA release. It's a game I told everyone about on Twitter the other day. I'd sort of hinted about it on my private Instagram, and I tweeted out the name like months ago just to see if anyone would respond to it saying that's a cool name or something, but no one did. And basically I was trying to make a little gameplay video because I'd got to a point where I wanted to show it off, and I released it on Twitter, and it was a short gameplay demo of a couple of things that you'll see in a little while. And it's called Flitspire. It's a game all about flying. You're a little vampire called Toa, and well, Lord Toa actually, because the tower is your tower. And the idea is that Toa has to climb his tower. So he has to fly up his tower very fast. He can fly, but he has a limited flight ability. So he can only fly for a short amount of time, and then he will fall. And then when you touch the ground, it will immediately reset his fly meter, and then you can immediately fly again. So the idea of the game is that you're moving very fast, flying as fast as you can up the tower to get the best time possible. The background of the story is that Toa, his tower, he was kicked off the top of it where he lives, the very, very top, all the way down to the bottom by his sister. They're both vampires. They're both like a royal vampire family. Obviously, it's a very small 2D indie game, so the story's not that extensive, but I like the idea of a younger sister kind of kicking her big brother off the top of the tower and taking it from him. I have a younger sister myself, and we used to fight all the time when we were younger, so it's kind of a little bit inspired by that. So the idea is, as Toa, you have to climb to the top of this tower and reclaim it. In some of the gameplay, it's been compared a little bit to Downwell. I actually know Mopin Ojiro, the creator of Downwell, because of meeting him here in Japan. He's a very lovely bloke who's working at Nintendo now, and I hope to show him Flitspire at some point soon. So the name Flitspire actually comes from wanting to have a very simple title and wanting to kind of like Downwell, not as on the nose as Downwell, something along those lines. So the idea comes from flit, which is to move very fast, like an animal that moves really quickly, and then spire being just another synonym for tower. So the game is called Flitspire, and you go very fast up a tower. I started doing prototypes with the state machine stuff that I was learning in Game Maker, and I was basically learning about changing the player's state into many, many different states depending on the objects they interact with, depending on the keys the player presses, and interacting with collision and all these different things that were really exciting, and I was really enjoying making stuff. And I came up with the idea of like, back off Downwell, what if you had a game that you were flying, but you could only fly for a short amount of time, then you had to reset it. So you were always flying, landing, and you just kept progressing really fast. And after like a couple of iterations, I got to the point where I had this very tiny little sprite vampire character that I'd been practicing with 8x8 grids in Photoshop to practice like pixel art, like I was getting into pixel art and stuff like that. And then I was importing it into Game Maker, and I was just using them as stuff in the prototype. And I liked the idea of this little vampire flying his way really fast up this tower, even though he was very unrecognizable as a vampire, as you'll probably agree. And then he was just like fighting enemies with this tiny short sword, and it was really fun, and I really liked it. I didn't expect that not a prototype, but an experiment I was making then would turn into a game that I wanted to carry on with. I really liked the idea of flying really quickly, resetting, flying and moving. Games that are fast, that require the player to just keep moving, have always interested me a lot more. I don't like slow plodding platformers. I love when Mario goes at full speed, or games like Downwell where you keep moving, Cannonbolt as well, which inspired my previous game, Salaryman Suzuki-san. Damn, I'm just copying some of the guests on my podcast, aren't I? Subconsciously, I promise. So I started iterating and started to flesh out the idea of Flitspire. And I drew up designs for all the enemies, wrote sort of how they're going to interact with the player, what they do to stop you, and how the levels are going to work, what are the phases that you would go through as the player, ultimately what the goal of the game is, which is to finish the game in the best time possible, get to the top of the tower. It's very arcadey, it's all about score, it's all about collecting coins, and just moving really fast. There is no like saving and like progressing slowly through the game. The idea is to just keep playing, die, get better, play, get better, die, get better, rinse and repeat kind of, get a sense of place, very quick to turn on, very quick to jump in and play through the game. So this then led to me thinking about what the gameplay pillars of the game are going to be. Number one is that flying is the most important thing. Moving through the tower really fast is the most operative, number one gameplay pillar of the game. It has to feel good. I spent a long time trying to make it feel as good as I possibly could, getting feedback from friends who'd been playing demos and tweaking it myself. And then the second was, what is like the way to spice up the variation of the gameplay if the players are going to be repeat playing through the levels now and again. Because the levels are static. Like the tower is a tower. It's a sense of place. Some people asked if I was going to make it procedurally generated, and because you're flying upwards, if it was procedurally generated, the thought process in my head is that you would always be going very slow to see what was above you or what was in front of you. You wouldn't be moving at fast speed because you would always be unsure of what's ahead. And that's kind of the antithesis of the idea of the game, which is to go fast and get the best time. So if you have a static place where you know where the platforms are after you've played it a few times, you will then always move fast because you know where you can jump to or where you can fly to. But to change it a little bit is that the enemies in the game, they have random placement. So they will appear random. So that does change up the gameplay a little bit every time. And on top of that, you have all of these weapons, which was the second main gameplay pillar, which is this risk-reward system where you have a gacha system, very much heavily inspired by my time here in Japan. Gacha machines are little capsule toy boxes that you put 500 yen in, and then you get a random capsule that has a random toy or figure or something inside of it that Japanese children collect, and also nerds and otaku from other countries that come to Japan and just spend lots of money on those gacha machines. So I was fascinated with the idea of what if the player put in the coins and got one weapon out. Any random weapon, that's it. They had to stick with that weapon. Even if it was bad, even if it was good, then they had to go through it the best they could and try and, finish the game with that weapon. Which means depending on how many weapons you have in the game, that is like 10 to 15 variations on the gameplay. And on top of that, if you don't like the weapon you got, you can put in more coins. But to get more coins means you have to fight lots of enemies. And that slows you down, so you are going slower and you're not getting the best time possible. So there is this risk-reward system in the game that you have to balance between, do I stop to attack enemies? Which enemies do I stop to attack? Some give more coins than others. Do I really need to change my weapon? Or I have a bad weapon, I'm just going to stick with it and go as fast as I can and see how far I get before I change my weapon. So there's all these gameplay pillars that were all very much looping into each other, like start the game, fight the enemies, get the coins, use the gacha, get the good weapon, move very fast. Or move very fast as much as you can, and then, this is too hard, I need to change the weapon, and then go again. And I was really excited by the idea of having this very simple core loop that I could build around. When making games, having your core loop, your core gameplay is the most important thing. You outscope yourself too much if you're trying to add in so many variations and so many different elements and forgetting whatever the core gameplay is. So having the core loop down and tweaking it now and again and basically building upon that, I started to create all the artwork for the game, which meant I had to spend a long time sort of reading about pixel art and practicing and getting better. As you can sort of see in the game, I'm still not great at pixel art, let's be honest. Shout out to my friend Hawken, the creator of the Pirate Pup games. Great video game creator and artist who helped me out with some tips about pixel art and basically helped break down some stuff for me, as well as reading some pixel art books. I had to do the artwork then, and then I was building upon that by designing the levels, moving from like old test levels to then having the boxed out levels, and then moving on to, you know, building upon what the aesthetic is, the aesthetic I've gone for is. As you can see in sort of the gameplay demos, there's a lot of Castlevania style stuff in there, bookcases and like wooden frames and boxes. I really liked the sort of inside of the tower feel to be like an old mansion. Like Toa's tower is a place that he lives. It's a place that he's built, his family have had for a long time. So there's like statues of him in there and stuff like that. So as I said, the current status of the game is that I'm building a sort of final vertical slice build at the moment that I'm aiming to hopefully have finished by October. This devlog is going to sort of chronicle my development from this point now, which is quite a way away from prototyping. I've thrown some stuff that I had lying around, like old build videos and old art, into this video for you to look at. I'm sorry it's been very rambly, but hopefully you'll enjoy my sort of progress as I finish this vertical slice, and then from then on maybe the full game, depending on what happens with some feedback. Making games is super hard and super time consuming. I have copious amounts of podcasts and work already on my plate, so making games takes up a lot of time, but I love doing it. Future sort of aims right now, I don't know whether I want to maybe pitch it to indie developers. I would love to get like a Switch version of this game going, because now Game Maker has Switch support. Like as soon as that was announced, I was like immediately wanting to do that and jump on that bandwagon. I would love to get this game on the Switch. To have my own game on a Nintendo platform would be like the best. So maybe pitch it to some developers, some indie publishers, mid-sized publishers, to help me sort of bring this product to life. Definitely going to be on PC if it gets finished. If not, I don't think I have the self-confidence to do something like a Kickstarter, but depending on how people react to these demos and this devlog, maybe, who knows, maybe we'll see a crowd-funded version of this game at some point. Once I finish this vertical slice, I'm hoping to just release it to you guys for you to play for free on itch, just the same as I did with Salaryman Zuxan. Collate all your feedback, basically get the idea whether it's good enough, whether you guys are interested or not, whether it's like something I should pursue in the future and carry on making the full game. I'm really enjoying making it. I would love to see it to completion. I am a one-man team. Everything you see so far is just me at the moment, and I don't have any money to pay people to come onto a team and help me finish the game, but it would be great to see it through to completion. This devlog will sort of chronicle that, and it's going to be available on my Patreon earlier than putting it on YouTube like I did with this first episode. So if you like the podcasts I do, or if you want to support the game development stuff I'm doing, you can actually go to patreon.com/Liam Edwards and you can support me on there, which I would massively appreciate. Other than that, I really hope you enjoyed a little look into Flitspire, my new project, this gave you a little insight in how video games are sort of made from prototype to here. It's been a little rambly. It's just an introduction. I hope to go into more specific details about aspects of the game, maybe animation, maybe programming and stuff like that. If you have any questions or anything you would like me to talk about, game design, specifically like designing gameplay mechanics or gameplay features, please leave a comment below or email me at finalgamespodcast@gmail.com. Other than that, please check out the two podcasts, Final Games Podcast and Dan Sons Podcast. And until then, I hope you've enjoyed this devlog, and I hope to see you again next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.